Hey, what's up, everybody? So, on today's podcast, video show, whatever you want to call it, I've got a good friend of mine, Jose, who is a recruiter, and he's been doing that job for 5 years now. And he's going to share with us some tips for working on your resume before you send out job applications, and then also some tips for interviews whenever you do land those interviews. So, Jose, I'll let you take it from here with a couple tips for people's resumes.
Yeah. Hey everyone. Like Ian said, my name's Jose. I've been recruiting for about 5 years now. Started out, at an agency, then did some in-house staffing. So I've seen, outside staffing and then inside staffing. You don't know the difference. Some companies hire outside agencies to help them with their recruiting services, and it's just kind of consulting. Either way, you're always going to be a consultant for your hiring manager, so it's the same thing. The downside is agencies can sometimes be very volume driven instead of quality driven. But you learn a lot either way. So I have two resumes, test candidate B, test candidate A. We'll start off with test candidate A. So when I looked at this resume, it's very bare bones. Changed it up a little bit just to kind of not, put anybody's information out there. But it's very bare bones. By just, quick skim of it, I looked at it and I was like, oh, this guy has experience with help desk. Seems like he's definitely trying to change careers. So I saw, he was doing some kind of boot camp courses, what kind of languages he was doing here in the programming skills. So that's the first thing that stood out. And then I saw here, the school and the education that he already has or she has. And that immediately told me, okay, cool, this person's trying to change careers. So that's fine. And that happens all the time. Most companies kind of are aware that people, change careers from time to time. So first things, you should do, have your contact information right at the top, very front, make it very easy to see. The one thing I would recommend is whenever you are inserting links into words here, that you also attach a link, because sometimes whenever you apply to a company's applicant tracking system, those links don't transfer over. So let's say I'm on my applicant tracking system. I click the link, knowing that it's a link that you're trying to send me to. I click it. For whatever reason, it doesn't work. Some companies shut it down for privacy. Some companies just aren't able to follow the link because of their older tracking system. So it really varies. So I would always recommend doing a link, or maybe just putting it at the end of your resume, say, hey, asking for my GitHub account, or just telling us your GitHub name. One thing that I see candidates make a lot of mistakes on is the professional objective. I think if you're gonna include a professional objective, be very, what's the best way to describe it? Be kind of efficient in what you're saying. If not, don't even include it. So for this one, to utilize my broad knowledge of programming, the software cycle, and to offer critical thinking and strong interpersonal skills, it's kind of very generic, doesn't really tell me a lot. So if I saw this, I would be like, all right, cool. So everyone says something like this. It doesn't really tell me too much. So I would include something like, to use my broad knowledge of programming in C++, JavaScript, etc., blah, 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 in order to get a job where I'm working on such and such projects that reaches blah, blah, blah amount of people, right? So it's kind of like more specific. For this, it's just very generic. So you want to be efficient with the space you're using. So if you're using just this to say something generic, I wouldn't even bother saying it, and I would save all that room for my experience. Programming skills and skills in general, that's always good to highlight at the front. Unfortunately, some recruiters do key talking points or key skill points, and they'll just do a control find, and they'll look for that, and then if they don't find it, some of them reject. But ideally a good recruiter, they call the person, they're like, hey, tell me a little bit about your experience. I saw that you're doing this, but I wasn't aware of what you're actually doing in order to accomplish your role. This is fine. I would recommend that you save education towards the end and put all of your skills and experience towards the front. Especially if they're not even completed yet, I would definitely put it towards the end as well. This again, I would include it in education towards the end of the resume. Work experience, cool. So this candidate immediately highlighted that this is the work experience. Highlighted that this is the company that they're working for. Highlighted their role. Again, so when I read this resume initially, I saw that without even reading that part, I knew that this person was a help desk person. So again, recruiters are trained to find things quickly just because they're working with X amount of resumes, and they're always a good amount of resumes, especially if they're working at a large company or a small company. If they're working at a small company, they're probably reading more resumes than at a larger company. So again, you have to, be very efficient with the time and your word space on a resume. For example, if you give me a resume that's 5 pages long, I have to get through so many other candidates. I can't give you, that much time. So I have to go in there and I have to skim specifically for what I'm looking for and see if this person has that experience. So again, be very efficient with your word space. So experience. Helping patients with their online portal for my health, helping them with their login issues, reset password issues. Cool. So obviously, this person again is helping people. However, he's not telling me how he or she is helping them. So, including a sentence or maybe even a bullet point of what they're actually doing to help those people would be very helpful for me. Calling back patients for more troubleshooting on the issue that were escalated. Cool. Definitely, elaborate a little bit more. How were you helping? Were you calling these clients or these people? What did you have them explain? What were you doing on your end? Just things to elaborate on. Help make it easier for the recruiter to be able to place you in the right role. Because even if you apply for the wrong role, a recruiter will be able to send you to the right role. For example, if I'm working with this candidate, I see they're not a fit for my role, and I'm like, hey, actually one of my colleagues, in this area is working on a role that this person could be a fit for. I'll be able to send that person over to that recruiter immediately, and then that person will reach out for that role. Again, so let's go to their fake experience 2. Monitoring of help desk tickets, provide resolution to the client within allotted times. Cool. So that tells me that this person has again allotted time to finish these tickets. So this is one thing that I wouldn't recommend wording it this way in a resume. If a resolution cannot be reached because something isn't working, explain to the client what the problem is and why the resolution will not be resolved. So be very careful of how you're wording, not being able to accomplish something. You want to word it in a way that shows, why it didn't work, what you attempted in order to complete it, and then how you eventually resolved the issue. Did you, help this client create a new account? Did you help this client gain access to whatever they're trying to reach? What did you do? You don't want to leave it at a failure, right? And why it will take more time to resolve. Again, super bare. I need more information in order to, figure out if this person is successful at their current role. Because at the end of the day, that's what every company is looking for. They're looking for someone that is successful and is ready to, help this company grow in whatever they're attempting to do. So fake experience 1, this was probably the most elaborated on one, which I really liked. So this person was super specific in what they were doing. They were migrating from Clarify, which I imagine some kind of database, to Oracle. Again, I would maybe include a little bit of what they were migrating. Also use Macro Express. So again, they're showing what they were using, how they were using it, tested scripts. So that's super good. I think that's the best part of their resume that they included. Again, here super specific what they were doing. So I wish they would include this kind of information for fake experience 2 and fake experience 3. I would definitely recommend putting your most present experience towards the top of your work experience, and then your oldest experience towards the end. If you're including extra experience, put it again towards the end of that experience, include details of that experience with the skills required to complete the job, and then any accomplishments that you had while actually doing that job. Education. So again, I talked about putting all of this, all of the in-progress online courses and completed courses was education here towards the bottom. Again, if we're being very efficient with what words we're using and how many of them we're actually using, we wouldn't want to include, high school diploma and associate of science in computer science. Especially some jobs require a bachelor's degree, so you at minimum have to have a bachelor's, so this wouldn't be something relevant for us. So you only want to put the most relevant information for us. If you have a GAD and you're applying for a role that doesn't require a bachelor's, that's fine. Include it for sure. Or if you just have a high school, definitely include it. But you want to be very careful with what you're putting. You don't want to waste too much time on that resume. Awards, list them at the end. I received President's Club for selling $1 million worth of blah, blah, blah. All right. So you want to put those towards the end. Any accomplishments in school, any scholarships, any, extracurriculars you're taking, anything you're doing on your own. Maybe you have a jiu-jitsu black belt and you won NAGA and you have a championship belt at a certain weight class. Maybe include that. But again, you don't want to waste too much words. So be careful with what you're doing. And you don't want to hear put on your professional objective, I love helping people, blah, blah, blah. That's nice. We want to get to know you, and we'll do that in the in-person interview. But as far as resumes, it's got to be very efficient. So if we're looking at test candidate B, this candidate didn't even put, professional objective. They're applying to the role. It seems like this person has a good amount of experience in what they're doing. So it's just straight to the point. This candidate is working with software engineers, driving them through the company's global hiring process. This person put some metrics, very straightforward. Then he put his roles and responsibilities. So it's very, very straightforward. Lets the person know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it. Experience too. Again, very straightforward. And so one thing that you should immediately tell is, so this person right here, they're doing some kind of recruitment, and then here it sells. So there's a career change. And if you notice here that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet points, and then I'm not even going to bother counting that, but it's a lot of bullet points on those last two most current roles. And this one only has two bullet points. Obviously, they didn't want to show too much information on that. It wasn't necessary. It wasn't something that they were looking for. And then education.
Awesome. So as far as takeaways are concerned, I'm seeing a lot of suggestions that are in alignment with a lot of the things that I tell students. And that is, you see a lot of resumes that they just want to tell the person's entire life story all the way from like high school, like weighted tables, all these different jobs, which is great to show that you have a work history. But at the same time, if you are targeting a specific role at a specific company, for example, a junior software developer role at company A, then you really want to tell a story in your resume about why you're the perfect candidate for that role.
Correct.
And so while there is a little bit of room, like you showed on test candidate B, for putting like a pre-existing or a previous job that isn't necessarily related to the role, that's the kind of thing that if there's no room for it, I would just ditch it altogether. Or like whoever's resume that is, they have just 2 bullets at the bottom.
Yeah.
And so the point being is there needs to be like a narrative, and it needs to guide the recruiter to the conclusion that that person fits the role that they're trying to apply for.
Yeah. So it's like, writing an essay. Whenever you're writing an essay, you don't want to let the reader come to conclusions on their own. You kind of want to guide them. You kind of want them to think what you're thinking and show your thought process. Same thing for a resume. You want to do the same thing. You want to guide the reader, the end reader, to what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, recruiters, what they're doing is they're quote unquote selling your resume to the hiring manager. Because then they have to, say, all right, I found a candidate. It matches the role that I'm working on. They have all the qualifications. I then take it to the hiring manager. I'm like, all right, cool. Hey, this guy meets all the qualifications. What do you think? Let's give him an interview. And then the hiring managers, they're not trained in interviewing. They're not trained in recruiting practices. They're not trained in any of that. They're working on their roles, but they're currently hiring for something that they need for their roles. So they're not an expert in interviewing or recruiting. So then they can start saying things that are kind of picky. So you want to make it easier for the recruiter. For example, on this test candidate A, I mentioned that, obviously they're trying to make a career jump, which is fine. However, nowhere in here are they showing me how they're using the languages, right? They're saying, I'm in progress, online courses, cool. They're showing me the programming skills, but I have seen zero, demonstration of that. So what I would do if I were this candidate, I would show, I've used JavaScript to create a application where the end user saw so-and-so, blah, 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 using blah, 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 right?
Yeah, typically,
go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. In that situation, what I tell students, because a lot of times if someone is just a student, they are switching careers, they don't have pre-existing work experience, but what they should have if they're taking these courses or even if they're self-taught is they should have projects on some type of a portfolio. And so if you have a project where you can say project A have a link to the GitHub so that the recruiter can see the code. Have a link to the working project demo if you have one, if it's hosted somewhere. But then in terms of like a little description, that's where you can begin writing the story, where you're hitting those keywords and you're saying, I used JavaScript, just like you said, to take data from the user for whatever and display it back using so-and-so technology and framework. And that's how, especially if that person is trying to get a job with those technologies. Now you're showing that you've used those technologies successfully, and the recruiter, hiring manager, whoever's looking at the resume now understands, okay, this person actually knows how to do what we're trying to hire someone to do.
And then the other thing on resumes, you want to make sure that you're applying to the correct role, right? Like I mentioned, most recruiters, they will share candidates to another recruiter if they see that they're a fit for another role. But if I'm, super busy day, super hectic, and I don't have time to share, and this person doesn't meet the qualifications, unfortunately, I'll most likely reject. But if you're doing this, you're applying to the right role. You want to make sure you match up on the years of experience that they're looking for. So this person, they have great experience. They're obviously super intelligent, and they're definitely they're people. This is someone who I know continuously learns and is obviously intelligent. However, this person I could also see as someone who applies to, a senior level role, or maybe a junior, not a junior level role, but a medium level role. This is the type of role that this person would apply to because, they're very intelligent. However, a company won't take that risk, and they'll want you to apply to an entry level role just because, you don't have experience for it. So this test candidate A would have to apply to an entry level role and not expect, maybe getting a manager role or even like a senior suite role or anything like that. This person should apply to an entry level role. Applying to the right role is a big difference.
Yeah, definitely. I know personally, because I've done quite a bit of interviewing, and sometimes it's just been for the sake of like seeing how the process is, so then I can then relay that to students.
Mm-hmm.
But most recently, I had an interview with a big tech company, and the one thing so I did everything that I know to do on my resume. I targeted the specific role. I highlighted all the things in my past experience that I thought would make me stand out for that role. And then if you're working specifically with a recruiter and you do get past that initial bump where they say, okay, this person has most of what I need, then in this particular instance, what happened was the recruiter came back and said, this looks good, but before I send it to the hiring manager, I need you to change these couple things and really add on to or highlight these different aspects of your resume so that you'll stand out above the other candidates that are potentially applying for this particular role. So in some cases, if you do get noticed initially, then the recruiter can actually help you target your resume even further to have a better chance, because then that looks good on the recruiter as well.
Absolutely. So you guys got to remember, at the end of the day, the recruiter is there to help you. They're your, let's call them, bridge to that company. And also, they're supposed to make hires. They're supposed to get people hired. That's their job. So they want to get you hired. So whenever, a recruiter asks you to improve your resume with so-and-so, they know their hiring manager. They know how that person is. That hiring manager can be picky. That person could not spelling errors. That person probably needs information exactly there in order to move forward with the candidate and before they feel comfortable talking to the person. So they're just trying to help you, get that interview.
Definitely. Cool. So that's a lot of information to take in. Let's go ahead and move on to the interview tips, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time, and then we can wrap things up and kind of come to a conclusion on all of it.
Cool. So I would always recommend that you guys Google the STAR interview method. It's super helpful. Situation, task, action, result. That's the way you should always kind of answer your questions. So they'll ask you, tell me about a time you had to work on a difficult project, or you had to work with a difficult coworker, or, tell me about a time that, you failed. Cool. What was the situation? What was the task that you had to do? What steps did you take? What was the actions that you did? And what was the results? That's really all they need to hear. Most interviews with an in-person interview or a phone interview with a hiring manager will probably be about an hour. So you have an allotted amount of time to get through that interview and give all the information that you have to the interviewer, right? So if I'm sitting there and I'm hearing a story about, I started out in high school, then I moved into, a waiting role, and then, the person starts describing their waiting role to me. And we haven't even gotten to the questions on programming, on, why they chose this career, any of the other stuff. Then, we ran out of time. You had 1 hour to impress this interviewer. And, because you weren't efficient with your time use, now the next person is going to interview, and they might have practiced, and they'll get it. Even though you guys might just be just as skilled, you weren't efficient with your time. So I always think situation, task, action, result.
Very good. Yeah, I know a lot of people are qualified for positions in terms of like technical ability, but that doesn't necessarily make them a good culture fit, and B, Absolutely. Like good at problem solving and people skills.
Absolutely.
And people think, oh, I'm just working behind a computer, I don't have to interact with others. But a lot of times you're working on a team.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have experience with working on a team and running into issues and overcoming those issues, then that can be a red flag a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Culture is definitely a thing. Then they might not ask you directly, because you can't ask, you can't really get to know someone's culture just through a question. So they're looking for different things while they're interviewing you to see if you're a culture fit. They want you to be a culture fit, but if you start, bashing your previous employer or bashing a previous employee, or you're never someone who takes blame, you're someone who kind of like shouts, or you're always right, that's a huge red flag for culture, and they probably won't hire you just based off that. So, you always have to be polite. If something did happen in your last job, definitely make that known. Don't hide it, because if, somebody calls to get references and they find something out that'll come back negative for you, for sure, don't hide it. Just say what happened, be polite, be respectful. Again, there's no need to burn bridges either way. So be respectful.
Yeah, it's good. Like you said, sometimes you're going to get background checked to a degree. They'll call your previous employer. And if you are upfront with whatever situation occurred, then you have the opportunity to give your side of the story first before Absolutely. They explore it any further. What do you think about, so typically in my experience with tech jobs, the initial interview is, so first you send the application, you get noticed, you get your first email or call, and then right now during the pandemic, of course, everything's going to be on Zoom or video. But the initial interview is generally a short kind of a culture fit, just like, is this person, like, can they communicate? I've already noticed that they have the technical abilities, so I'm not entirely worried about that. We'll get to it later. Let's make sure that they're like a normal functioning human being, and then we can move on to step 2, which is typically some type of technical examination, some type of quiz, some type of like what they call whiteboarding, where you have to solve something on a whiteboard. And then once you get past step 2, it's kind of on to, all right, we're really considering this person. They have everything we're looking for. Now we have to figure out if the salary is going to work for them and work for us, what they want, what we want to give. And so when you get to that point, do you have any suggestions on how to talk about salary, how to negotiate salary, anything in that regard?
Yeah, so I would back up a little bit. I think, you touched on some really great points. So first, let's understand the interview process. There's a whole bunch of steps through, interviewing, recruiting. So if you're thinking about it this way, first the application is sent, or the recruiter reaches out to the person. There's a difference in a passive and an active candidate, right? But either way, an application has to be created for this candidate. So let's start there. The application is created. The recruiter reaches out. That's called the phone screen. Here, all that recruiter is looking for is, does this person meet the qualifications for the role, and are they a culture fit? After that, what then happens is, there's either an interview with the hiring manager, or someone on the team, or someone who's currently doing a similar role. In that interview, they're looking again for culture fit and for technical abilities. And actually, I just realized I made a mistake on what I was saying. So let's go back to the phone screen with the recruiter and just the candidate. That recruiter, what they're doing there is, checking for your qualifications and experience, but they'll also ask you some questions based off, your experience, what sort of responsibilities you're looking for, and they will always ask you, and they should ask you, is what sort of compensation are you looking for? And one key thing to remember is, I think Texas is actually one of the states where they can ask you, but they won't, because they understand that, you have a lot of different options. But they shouldn't be asking you what you're currently making. You should only tell them always, even if they're asking what you're currently making, what you want to make. But again, don't price yourself out. Don't say I want $1 million. Obviously, know what your role is worth, know what your experience is worth. If you have 0 years amount of experience and you just want to get an entry level role, don't say I want 100,000 a year. Not going to happen, right? Say I have 3 years of experience. I've been doing these kind of projects. I'm currently making 70K a year. I think realistically I'm worth 90, 100K. Cool. That seems reasonable. Tell that to the recruiter. I'm looking for 100K. The recruiter will then tell you, yeah, cool, that matches up with what we're looking for. And if it's higher, they will tell you, hey, that's more than what we're looking for this role. Are you open to considering X amount of dollars? Cool. The candidate then chooses, yes, I can, or no, I can't. But either way, you save yourself some time, and then you get moved on to the next step if you are able to meet that compensation range that they're looking for. I find that a lot of candidates think, and sadly it happens all the time, but candidates think because they're so smart, because they're so great, they don't have to prove to us anything. But unfortunately, when you're working at any kind of company yet and you're applying, you're interviewing, yes, you do. You have to prove to us why you're worth that amount of money. And most companies have a salary range that they're looking for whatever level role they're working on. If you're looking to get into software engineering work, you're looking to get into any kind of project management work, they have levels to those roles. There could be a software engineer 1, 2, 3, a program manager 1, 2, 3, etc. So they have an entry to a senior level role, and they each have a salary range. Just because you're asking for 100,000 or 200,000, they're not going to put you in the senior level role just because you asked for that salary range if you don't meet that experience. So that's the thing you have to understand. After that, you'll get a technical interview with either a hiring manager or some kind of interviewer that can interview you at that level. And then you'll get an on-site interview or a face-to-face interview because of everything that's going on. And again, be respectful. It's all about culture and showing your technical abilities as well. As a candidate, don't bring up compensation. If you're already at the on-site stages, that means that you're within the salary range of that role that you're interviewing for. Let the recruiter be the person to bring up compensation at the end. Everything went great. On-site interview, all the phone interviews went great. Everything's golden. The recruiter will give you a call, say, hey, I have good news for you. I spoke with so-and-so, and they're super interested in your background. They think you're a great culture fit. They think you have the technical abilities for this role. Are you interested in jumping on board? Candidate responds, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. Cool. All right, so now I know what to do next. Candidate responded, yes, I am. Then I'll tell them, all right, so here's what they're looking to offer you. They're looking to offer you random number 90K a year with a sign-on bonus of X amount, and this kind of a stock within the company, this amount of PTO days. Then the candidate takes some time, says, yes, I accept that. That's awesome. I love hearing that. For me, that means I hit it right on the head, and I got you exactly what you're looking for. Or the candidate's like, okay, I'm actually interviewing with other companies. I appreciate the offer. I always thank them for it. But I want to finish up these other interviews and see, how it goes with the other companies as well. That puts a little bit of pressure on the current company you're interviewing with, and that lets them know, hey, he or she has different opportunities and offers out there. We might have to offer more, which happens all the time, and it's completely fine. I always advocate for my candidates. I want them to get paid, and I want them to be happy, because if they're not happy, they're going to leave, and it's going to look bad on me. So that whole tangent was about bringing up compensation at the very end. Let the recruiter do it. Don't ever bring it up by yourself. Let somebody else do it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the dynamic of the interview process changes as you get more experience. So looking for a developer position role is entirely different from having like 5 years of experience under your belt, because it doesn't change the fact that you need to be polite, et cetera, and like go through the motions. But once you've been through a handful of jobs and you have all this experience, then if you are looking for more work, it's probably because you are looking for more money, or maybe you had to move somewhere, or some type of circumstance has changed. But as you're going through the process, at least for me, in my experience, I don't like start the interview with like, oh, how much are you guys going to pay me? But I
Yeah.
usually end the initial interview, when the recruiter's like, okay, great, you know, they tell me, oh, we'll get back to you, whatever. Do you have any additional questions? And if they haven't already asked me about compensation in that interview, and I'm really just kind of juggling a couple different companies to figure out which one is the best fit in terms of whatever my criteria is, including compensation, then I'll bring it up and say, yeah, actually, I was just wondering what you guys intended to pay for this particular role.
Yeah, so I'll stop you that there real quick. I
Yeah, go ahead.
wouldn't ask them what they're looking to pay for this role, just because most companies have a salary range for whatever role, or an hourly range for whatever role they're working on. So I wouldn't ask them. I would say, all right, I'm also interviewing with this company, and they made me an offer for X amount of dollars, and that way it's on the recruiter and that other company to tell you what they can offer you. I wouldn't necessarily let them, tell you this is what I can offer, right? Because then you're kind of selling yourself short.
Yeah. Well, I like that. And I think that strategy kind of applies across the board where even if you're looking for a junior role, you can still play the card of, oh, I'm interviewing with other companies as well, and I'm waiting to hear back, these different offers on the table. And that, like you said before, it puts pressure on the company. And so no matter what, I personally, even if you only were interviewing with two companies, I would still say something like that just so they kind of get the idea of like, okay, if we really want this candidate, we have to make sure and entice them.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Do you have, to wrap things up, do you have like one thing that stands out the most as being like just blanket the most important thing that you can do, either in the resume creation process or interview process, or both, that like stands out to you as being like one of the most important things?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the best thing you can do for, at the resume creation stage is tailor your resume to that specific job. If I'm applying for a sales role, I'm going to make sure that all of my skill sets and all of my experience that I've written down in that resume sounds like it's going to be a sales role. If I'm applying for a software engineering job, I want to make sure that every single experience that I have on that resume is specifically tailored for that role. A lot of different jobs require different skills, whether it's, specifically coding in JavaScript versus coding in like C Sharp, or, any other language. Make sure that for the specific job you're applying to, you tailor your resume to fit that specific experience you're looking for.
Awesome. Yeah. That made me think that if you're a junior developer, you don't have any pre-existing work experience, then you really have to take that time to focus on projects that use the technologies that are going to be used at the companies that you're applying for, because that's where you're going to create that narrative on your resume that says, I've worked with this stuff. Like, yes, I haven't gotten a job for it before, but I've used it and know how to use it, and I can do the things that you need me to do in this particular position that I'm applying for.
Applying to the right role and the right level makes a huge difference. For example, different level roles have different level interviews. So if you can't structure an entry level interview versus a senior level interview the same way and expect the same outcome. A senior level role should be someone that can work faster, more efficiently, has a lot more experience. So we expect that kind of result in the interview as well. Versus an entry level person might require a little more time to think. So you always want to apply to the right role. You don't want to apply to a senior level role when you're an entry level candidate and then just get completely trashed on that interview.
Definitely. And one thing that I thought of before that I didn't bring up, because I know as a recruiter, this isn't necessarily your area, but once you do get to the part of the interview where someone technical, maybe the CTO, is interviewing you with like a whiteboard or a technical interview, the problem that they're going to give a lot of students, or problems, it's not always about being able to solve the problem. Like, a lot of people think, oh, I left that interview and I wasn't able to solve it. And,
Mm-hmm.
they blanked out and they just couldn't figure it out. Maybe even with some hints from the CTO or whoever was interviewing
You'll
them.
get hints.
Yeah. The important thing to remember is it's only a certain percentage about knowing how to solve the problem. And it's also a major, like 50% or more, about how you go about solving any problem, like what your process is. So if you're just like, I'm blank, I can't figure it out, and you just sit there staring at the whiteboard for 20 minutes, that's obviously a red flag. But if the whole time you're working through a process, even if you don't solve that problem because it's complex and it's a little over your skill level, they're still going to see that you have these different fundamentals that they're looking for in someone who can actually, figure out how to solve problems in the
Yeah,
workplace.
showing your thought process on any kind of problem is always super helpful. Because then you'll get hints. Maybe they'll push you towards the right way. They won't ever give you the right answer or a way to respond to that question, but they'll give you hints, and showing your thought process could help you out in a big way, especially towards the end of the interview.
Awesome. Well, Jose, I really appreciate the time you took to join us and tell us everything you know. Really appreciate it. We'll go ahead and cut it off here, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Enjoy your day. Bye, guys.